Why have we, the human race, arrived at such a state of confusion and chaos? This is a question that is posed very often these days, yet nobody seems to have given the correct answer. If we are to find it, then we must go away back to the beginning of things and search out the fundamental truths which were incorporated in man. These have survived being eternal even to this present age of chaos. But for the most part, he is unaware of the still small voice always ready to be of spiritual service to him. If we think carefully and reason with ourselves, we are brought to the realization that in the beginning, whenever that may have been, man was educated and cared for by nature, and so long as he observed the laws by which she operated, then all things were well for him. Mankind lived in harmony and peace with all creation. The animals were also peaceful, and there was a bond of companionship and love between the human and animal kingdom. As time moved on, some human beings awakened more quickly to the wonders surrounding them than did others. At first this was harmless, and the desire to obtain power for personal benefit had not yet presented itself to man's mind as being the first essential of human existence. Finally, however, with the accumulation of knowledge, this came about, and he grew aware of the wealth of natural laws and phenomena surrounding him. More and more he gave his attention to mastering them and finally turning them to his own purpose. At first, no ill results were visible, and the subtle process of free will in its relationship to accumulating knowledge crept on like a moving shadow, always going forward and bringing with it an ever-growing light of understanding. At length came the day when individually man realized that his knowledge was more than that of many of his companions. In fact, he could, with benefit to himself, make use of the labors of those less quickly awakening brethren around him. This appeared beneficial also for them because they received food and lodging for their work and were relieved of the hazards which stalked all seeking to support life in those far-off days. So it was that groups and clans sprang up within the human community of peoples, and each clan was dependent upon the intelligence and knowledge of its self-appointed chief man. At last these chiefs began to realize a sense of well-being within themselves and harbored a pride that their particular clan was superior to another, thus sowing the first seeds of what has eventually become world nationalism. Now the chiefs of these clans had claimed areas of land over which they exercised control. All was still well, and peace and harmony reigned amongst them. As I have said, the subtle shadow of knowledge and understanding was ever creeping relentlessly onwards until at last it brought with it a realization of power for domination over the lives and freedom of others. Yes, that was the first nail in the coffin of peace and brotherhood for mankind in those far-off days. Do not be mistaken and think that man was, as your scientists tell you, a brutish animal-like creature, warring and destroying with all who came near him. He was not. He was gentle and peace-loving until the day when he realized that he had within himself power, that he argued was his right to use as he willed by reason of his greater knowledge, which had gradually accumulated until now he could dominate and control those of the human family who had not arrived at his state of understanding. He now ceased to be kind and gentle in his newfound knowledge, and forced his fellows to work with him for his own benefit and on his own terms, having less and less regard for the conditions of those under his domination. With time, the various self-appointed rulers coveted the lands and possessions of each other, and as obviously they could not obtain ownership of them by the mere fact of asking, they resorted to force, which is the firstborn of power. All this had proceeded for many ages of Earth's time. Then there happened a thing which had not yet entered into man's consciousness. Certain men became aware of a mysterious spiritual force within themselves which was quite apart from the purely physical body. Gradually they explained and taught this to others, who in turn realized this fundamental truth and spread it further. At last the day came when certain men of intellect realized that this newly discovered spiritual understanding could be brought under an organized central control. Houses of spiritual learning were built, and intending students could acquire knowledge under the guidance of teachers. These teachers, who had the pure spiritual wisdom, taught those who came to them that they must seek truth within, even as they themselves had done. Then was it that the chiefs or rulers of the various communities began to realize the danger accruing to themselves and devised a plan whereby it could be removed. They initiated centers of teaching within the territories over which they had dominion, and under the guise of helping the people in spiritual matters, they elected teachers from amongst their own supporters. These had instructions to expunge gradually and unobtrusively all that conflicted with the code by which they lived and governed. At last we come to a social order having within its fabric religious and temporal power, church and state working side by side, sometimes in harmony and sometimes bitterly opposed, with religion as the dominating force and controlling secular authority. Chapter 2: The Rise of Evil. It is some 17,000 years now since a great and wonderful civilization was engulfed, destroyed, and despoiled by the monstrous but avenging forces of nature. That nature whose knowledge, if cherished as a thing of beauty and used for the benefit of mankind, instead of for power and gain for selfish ends, can bring untold blessings upon the whole human race. Yes, Atlantis and all its marvelous culture was engulfed and sank beneath the bosom of the ocean. Today the only visible remains are the Azores, which are the summits of the great mountains of the sacred heights, where dwelt the sons of God, the divine teachers who in the great and golden days governed and taught a satisfied and contented community of people. Then came the day when evil reared its head as lust for power and domination swept through the consciousness of man. The result was that divine knowledge was used for the benefit of those who had stolen its secrets, until finally such a potential of evil was created that nature was spontaneously detonated, destroying all that came within the scope of her avenging hand. Yet civilization did not entirely perish, for many colonists had left Atlantis during the centuries before the Great Cataclysm, and they brought their culture to parts of Western Europe, the Mediterranean, Egypt, India, and China. Others, of course, went in a westerly direction, and relics of the civilizations they founded are constantly being brought to light in the Americas. These were the beginnings of the new civilization which grew throughout the world until, over a period of some 17,000 years, it has developed into world culture as we know it today. Started, comparatively speaking, by pioneer bands of colonists and refugees who, moved by an inner consciousness or cosmic urge, left their doomed homeland. Through the intervening periods of time, nations have risen and, for a while, dominated the world of their day, only to fall into decay and themselves become the prey of other and greater conquerors. Why have these various nations within the great family of humanity stood divided by war and greed for power and domination over their fellows, and why have they striven individually for dominion over the whole earth? The answer is given in the Osirian scripts, for in the Book of Truth, Part 1, chapters 4 through 8 inclusive, we read in the curse of Sataniku, "Behold, I, Sataniku, will strive with thee for the mastery of the world called earth. I will defy and set at naught the commands of Godhead. Those same commands shall I parody, in so much that men shall not know in which direction to turn, that they may receive the true word of the Father God. And I will cause thy twin names to be hated and despised of all men, because thou, Adam el-Jahud, hast hearkened unto the voice of thy female half, who is Evam, and hast listened unto the temptations that have proceeded out of her lips. So hast thou been the cause of evil, to bring dishonor upon the heads of those evolving Yehavic divine sparks. And I will wrest from thee the dominion of earth, for behold, I am a god even as thou." This curse of Uranus or Lucifer is the challenge which was thrown down by that Son of God when he, as a divine representative of earth, was admonished by his elder brother Adam el-Daoud, God's viceroy for the spheres of matter and gross matter within our solar system, because he was meddling with the evolutionary plan for the children of earth. In the biblical account, or legend, we are told that Adam lent an ear unto Eve, his female counterpart, and did eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden. What happened in fact was that Eve, or Evam, according to Duman custom, acted as the medium or ear to her male half El-Daud and gave him the knowledge of what Uranus had contrived to do with evolution, and also told him God's commands concerning Uranus' future. These were that evil personified by Uranus was to be used to strengthen man's purpose for good by causing him to reincarnate over periods and thus work his way back to the original point in the divine plan when error or evil originated. Uranus' threat was that he would parody all God's commands so that man would not know what was right and what was wrong. The biblical legend, by misrepresenting the facts, put Uranus' threat into operation. It talks of Adam and Eve as the first man and woman, whereas in reality they were amongst the first female-male spirits created outside the Trinity of Godhead, the Father, Mother, Son. Uranus' will came into conflict with El-Dawood's authority, and so the fight between good and evil was started. In consequence of Uranus' curse and God's decision to use evil to test or strengthen good, we have had a constant fight being waged throughout the ages ever since man came into the mortal flesh. It has been a mental fight to a great extent because man has free will and can take whatever pathway he wishes. He can listen to the promptings of his lower self, which is in contact with all the lower astral vibrations of thought, or he can aspire to climb higher and reach upwards through his higher self or God consciousness. In this way, he can become a force for good upon earth by his knowledge of the laws of nature and by demonstrating the benefits to be gained in using them for the good of others. Jesus was such an example and put his teachings into practice.